The morning sun cast long shadows across the military airbase as Captain Lisa Rodriguez walked toward the hangar, her flight helmet tucked under her arm. At 32 years old, she had earned something that many thought impossible just a decade ago: the respect of every pilot in her squadron. But respect, she had learned, was different from acceptance. Lisa had always known she was different. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she spent her childhood building model airplanes while other girls played with dolls. Her father, a mechanic, taught her how engines worked. Her mother, a schoolteacher, made sure she never doubted that the sky was the limit. When other kids asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, Lisa always gave the same answer: a fighter pilot. People laughed. Some said it kindly, others not so much. Women weren't fighter pilots, they said. That was man's work. Dangerous work. But Lisa had fire in her belly that couldn't be put out by doubt or discouragement. She joined the Air Force right after college, her engineering degree in hand and determination in her heart. Basic training was brutal, but Lisa had prepared her whole life for brutal. She ran faster, trained harder, and studied longer than anyone else. When others complained about the heat, the cold, or the exhaustion, Lisa kept pushing forward. Flight school was where she truly began to shine. While other candidates struggled with the complex mathematics of aerodynamics or panicked during high-stress simulations, Lisa remained calm and focused. Her instructors noticed something special about her, an almost supernatural ability to think 3 steps ahead while managing multiple systems under extreme pressure. Rodriguez has instincts you can't teach, her primary instructor told his colleagues. She doesn't just fly the plane, she becomes part of it. Her first real test came during a training exercise over the Nevada desert. Engine failure at 15,000 feet, with a storm rolling in fast. While her instructor prepared to take control, Lisa methodically worked through emergency procedures, found a safe landing zone, and brought the aircraft down without a scratch. The whole thing took less than 4 minutes. Her instructor, a veteran pilot with 20 years of experience, sat in stunned silence for a moment before saying, "I've never seen anything like that." Word spread quickly through the base. The young woman pilot who could handle anything. But with recognition came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came those who didn't want her there. Lisa's first assignment was to the 47th Fighter Squadron, an elite unit with a reputation for excellence and a culture that hadn't changed much since the 1960s. The squadron commander, General Robert Harrison, was a decorated veteran who had flown combat missions in 3 different conflicts. He was respected, feared, and set in his ways about how things should be done. Her first day with the squadron, Lisa arrived early, as she always did. She spent time in the hangar, going over her aircraft with the maintenance crew, checking every system twice. The other pilots began filtering in around 7 a.m. and she could feel their eyes on her. Some nodded politely. Others whispered among themselves. Lieutenant Tommy Chen was the first to approach her directly. He was about her age, with an easy smile and genuine curiosity rather than judgment in his eyes. "So you're the pilot everyone's been talking about," he said, extending his hand. "Heard you made quite an impression in training." Lisa shook his hand firmly. "Just doing my job," she replied. "Well, around here we all just do our jobs," Tommy said with a grin. "The trick is doing them well enough to survive Harrison's inspections." Over the following weeks, Lisa threw herself into learning everything about her new unit. She studied mission reports, memorized tactical procedures, and spent extra hours in the simulator. Her flying was flawless, her knowledge encyclopedic, and her dedication obvious to everyone except General Harrison. During their first formal evaluation, Harrison barely looked at her performance scores. Instead, he questioned whether she had the mental toughness for combat situations. When she answered every technical question perfectly, he wondered aloud if she was too emotional for split-second decision-making. When she demonstrated superior flying skills, he suggested she might be showing off rather than working as part of a team. Lisa kept her responses professional and respectful, but inside, something was building. She had faced doubt before, but this felt different. This felt personal. Her fellow pilots began to notice the unequal treatment. During mission briefings, Harrison would interrupt Lisa's contributions or dismiss her suggestions without consideration. He would assign her to less challenging flights, then criticize her for lack of experience with complex operations. It was a trap with no escape. She couldn't prove herself if she wasn't given the chance. But Lisa had learned something important during her years in the military. Documentation was everything. She began keeping detailed records of every interaction, every assignment, every evaluation. She wrote down dates, times, and witnesses. She saved emails and recorded phone calls when legally permitted. If anyone ever questioned her version of events, she would have proof. The breakthrough moment came during a joint training exercise with another squadron. Lisa was assigned as wingman to Captain Mike Stevens, a solid pilot but not particularly gifted. The exercise involved a complex aerial combat scenario against experienced adversary pilots. Within minutes of the engagement beginning, Stevens made a critical error that left him vulnerable to attack. Lisa immediately broke formation. To protect him, engaged 2 enemy aircraft simultaneously and successfully defended her wingman while completing the primary mission objective. The whole sequence was captured on multiple cameras and radar systems. After landing, the visiting squadron commander sought Lisa out personally. "I've been flying for 18 years, he told her, "and I've never seen flying like that. You probably saved Stevens' life out there, and you made it look easy." The praise felt good, but Lisa knew the real test would be Harrison's reaction. During the debrief, he barely mentioned her performance. Instead, he focused on her deviation from assigned formation and questioned whether she had followed proper communication protocols. Stevens himself spoke up. "Sir, with respect, Lisa saved my life out there. I made a mistake, and she covered for me perfectly." Harrison's jaw tightened visibly. Captain Rodriguez's job is to follow orders, not make independent decisions that could compromise the mission. The room fell silent. Every pilot there knew what they had witnessed, and it wasn't insubordination or poor judgment. It was exceptional, flying and quick thinking under pressure. That night, Lisa sat in her quarters writing in her journal, a habit she had maintained since childhood. She wrote about the day's events, about the growing tension with Harrison, and about her growing certainty that something would have to change. She had worked too hard and come too far to let one man's prejudices derail her career. But she also knew that confronting a general directly would be career suicide. She needed to be smart, patient, and strategic. As she closed her journal and prepared for bed, Lisa had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Harrison's disapproval was about to escalate into something far more serious in public, but she also didn't know that her careful documentation and the respect she had earned from her fellow pilots would soon become the most important assets of her career. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change not just Lisa's life, but the entire culture of military aviation. 3 months had passed since the joint training exercise, and Lisa thought things might finally be settling down. She had continued to excel in every assignment. Her flight records were spotless, and several of her fellow pilots had started coming to her for advice on complex maneuvers. Maybe she hoped General Harrison was finally seeing her as just another capable pilot in his squadron. She couldn't have been more wrong. The morning of March 15th started like any other. Lisa arrived at the base before sunrise, grabbed coffee from the mess hall, and headed to the briefing room to review the day's mission parameters. The squadron was preparing for their annual readiness evaluation, a comprehensive test that would determine their overall rating and future assignments. Everything had to be perfect. As pilots began filing into the briefing room, Lisa noticed an unusual tension in the air. Conversations were quieter than normal, and several people kept glancing at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Tommy Chen caught her eye and gave her a small nod, but even his usual cheerful demeanor seemed strained. General Harrison entered at exactly 0800 hours, his posture rigid, and his face set in the stern expression he wore during formal evaluations. Behind him walked Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base inspector who would be observing their readiness assessment. Lisa had heard good things about Colonel Hayes. She was known as a fair leader who judged people solely on their performance. "Good morning, pilots," Harrison began, his voice carrying easily through the room. As you know, today begins our annual evaluation period. Colonel Hayes will be observing our operations over the next week, and I expect nothing less than perfection from each of you. Lisa straightened in her chair, ready to demonstrate everything she had learned and accomplished over the past year. Her mission folder was organized, her aircraft was in perfect condition, and her preparation was thorough. She felt confident and ready. Harrison began going through the day's assignments, calling out pilot names and their specific roles in the evaluation exercises. Lisa waited for her name, expecting to be assigned to one of the more challenging scenarios that would showcase the squadron's capabilities. Captain Rodriguez. Harrison's voice cut through the room like a knife. Lisa stood at attention. Yes, sir. What happened next would be burned into her memory forever. Harrison paused for what felt like an eternity, his eyes scanning the room to make sure he had everyone's attention. When he spoke, his voice carried a tone of disgust that made Lisa's stomach drop. Captain Rodriguez, I've been reviewing your recent performance reports, and I have some concerns. He held up a thick folder, waving it slightly for emphasis. Your decision-making during last month's exercise showed a disturbing pattern of emotional instability that has me questioning whether you belong in this squadron at all. The room went dead silent. Lisa felt her face flush hot, but she remained, standing at attention, her training taking over even as her world began to crumble around her. Harrison wasn't finished. He began reading from what he claimed were her evaluation reports, though Lisa knew he was either exaggerating or outright fabricating many of the criticisms. He questioned her judgment, her ability to handle stress, and her commitment to following orders. Perhaps, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, Captain Rodriguez would be better suited to a desk job where her emotional tendencies won't put other pilots at risk. Lisa heard a few nervous chuckles from some of the younger pilots, those who were still trying to find their place in the squadron's hierarchy, and thought laughing along with the general might help their careers. But she also noticed that the more experienced pilots, Tommy, Captain Stevens, and several others, were staring at Harrison with expressions of shock and disapproval. Colonel Hayes, who had been taking notes throughout the briefing, looked up, with a frown. Lisa caught her eye for just a moment and saw something there. Not pity, but concern, and perhaps confusion about what she was witnessing. Harrison continued his public assault for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. He suggested that Lisa's presence in the squadron was disruptive to unit cohesion. He questioned whether she had the physical and mental fortitude necessary for combat operations. Most painfully, he implied that her previous successes had been luck rather than skill. I want everyone in this room to understand, Harrison said, his eyes now fixed directly on Lisa, that there is no room for weakness in this squadron. Combat aviation is not a place for those who let emotions cloud their judgment or who think they deserve special treatment because of their gender. The word gender hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Harrison had finally said what everyone knew he was thinking. This wasn't about Lisa's performance or her decision-making. This was about the fact that she was a woman in what he considered a man's job. Lisa's hands trembled slightly, but she kept them rigidly at her sides. Years of military training had taught her to maintain composure under pressure, but nothing had prepared her for this level of public humiliation. She felt every eye in the room on her, some sympathetic, others uncomfortable, a few openly hostile. When Harrison finally finished his tirade, he dismissed Lisa from the day's primary exercises and assigned her to what was essentially busy work, reviewing maintenance reports and updating filing systems. It was the kind of assignment given to pilots who were being disciplined or pushed out of active duty. As the briefing ended and pilots began filing out to prepare for their missions, Lisa remained standing at attention until the room was nearly empty. Colonel Hayes approached her, speaking quietly. Captain Rodriguez, I'd like to speak with you privately after today's exercises are complete. Lisa nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady if she spoke. Tommy Chen lingered until almost everyone else had left. When he was sure they wouldn't be overheard, he stepped closer to Lisa. That was completely out of line, he said quietly. Everyone knows it. Your flying is better than half the pilots in this room, and Harrison knows it too. Lisa finally found her voice. I appreciate that, but I can handle this situation. Can you? Tommy asked, his expression serious. Because what just happened wasn't a performance evaluation. That was character assassination. After Tommy left, Lisa remained alone in the briefing room for several minutes. She thought about her father, who had taught her that sometimes life would knock her down. But what mattered was how quickly she got back up. She thought about her mother, who had always told her that standing up for what's right wasn't always easy, but it was always necessary. Most importantly, she thought about the small recording device in her breast pocket that had captured every word of Harrison's public humiliation. Lisa had been documenting their interactions for months, but today had provided her with something far more valuable than she had ever expected, a clear recording of discriminatory behavior witnessed by dozens of people, including a high-ranking inspector from outside the squadron. As she walked back to her quarters that evening, avoiding the sympathetic looks and whispered conversations of her fellow pilots, Lisa realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer just trying to prove herself worthy of her position. Now she was fighting for something much bigger, the right of every qualified woman to serve without facing the kind of treatment she had endured. Harrison thought he had broken her spirit and damaged her career beyond repair. What he didn't know was that he had just given her the ammunition she needed to bring his entire career crashing down. The general had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated the quiet strength of the pilot he was trying to destroy. That night, Lisa sat alone in her small quarters, staring at the collection of files spread across her desk. For months, she had been quietly documenting every interaction with General Harrison, but now the weight of what she was considering felt overwhelming. Taking on a decorated general wasn't just risky. It could destroy her career and the careers of anyone who supported her. The recording device sat in the center of her desk like a loaded weapon. She had listened to Harrison's humiliating speech 3 times, and each replay made her angrier. But anger wouldn't be enough. She needed a plan, allies, and most importantly, she needed to be absolutely certain she could win. Lisa picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Major Diana Walsh was a military lawyer. She had met during a conference 2 years earlier. Diana had a reputation for taking on difficult cases and fighting for service members who faced discrimination. More importantly, she was known for winning. The phone rang twice before Diana's familiar voice answered. This is Major Walsh. Diana, it's Lisa Rodriguez. We met at the leadership conference in Colorado Springs. Lisa, of course, the fighter, pilot, how are things going with your squadron? Lisa took a deep breath. That's actually why I'm calling. I need legal advice, and I think I need it fast. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What kind of trouble are we talking about? The kind that could end careers if we're not careful. Diana's tone became immediately serious. I can be at your base tomorrow evening. Don't discuss this with anyone else until we talk face to face. The next 24 hours crawled by like a week. Lisa went through her duties mechanically, trying to act normal while her mind raced with possibilities and fears. Several pilots approached her with quiet words of support, but she kept her responses brief and professional. She couldn't risk involving anyone else until she knew exactly what she was dealing with. Diana arrived at the base guest quarters just after sunset. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and the kind of presence that commanded respect despite her modest height. Lisa had always admired her directness and her reputation for not backing down from difficult fights. They met in a conference room that Lisa had reserved under the pretense of reviewing training materials. Diana listened without interruption as Lisa played the recording from the briefing and explained the months of documented mistreatment. When the recording ended, Diana sat quietly for several moments before speaking. Lisa, what you have here is potentially explosive. But before we go any further, I need to ask you something important. Are you absolutely certain you want to pursue this? What do you mean? I mean that once we start down this path, there's no going back. Harrison has powerful friends, and a decorated service record. Even if we win, there will be people who see you as the pilot who destroyed a war hero's career. Some doors may close for you permanently. Lisa thought about the humiliation she had endured, about the other women who might face similar treatment, about the principle of what was right versus what was safe. "I'm sure," she said quietly. Diana nodded. "Then we need to build an absolutely bulletproof case. What you have so far is good, but it's not enough. We need more evidence, more witnesses, and we need to document a pattern of behavior that goes beyond just your experiences." Over the following weeks, Lisa and Diana worked carefully to investigate Harrison's history. They discovered that Lisa wasn't his first target. 3 other female officers had requested transfers from his command over the past 5 years, citing personality conflicts and differences in leadership style. The official records were clean, but Diana knew how to read between the lines. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Captain Jennifer Park, a logistics officer who had worked under Harrison 2 years earlier, reached out to Lisa after hearing rumors about potential legal action. "I need to talk to you," Jennifer said during a chance encounter at the base commissary. "There are things you should know about Harrison that aren't in any official records." They met at a coffee shop off base, away from curious eyes and listening ears. Jennifer's story was painfully familiar: constant criticism, public humiliation, assignments designed to set her up for failure, and subtle but persistent suggestions that she wasn't cut out for military service. "I should have fought back," Jennifer said, her voice filled with regret. "But I was young and I was scared. I just requested a transfer and tried to forget it ever happened." "Why are you telling me this now?" Lisa asked. "Because I heard what happened to you in that briefing. Colonel Hayes called me personally to ask about my time under Harrison's command. I think she suspects something isn't right." This was the confirmation Lisa and Diana had been hoping for. Colonel Hayes, the inspector who had witnessed Harrison's public attack, was conducting her own quiet investigation. Lisa contacted Colonel Hayes and requested a private meeting. They met in Hayes's temporary office, and Lisa was surprised by the older woman's direct approach. "Captain Rodriguez, I've been in the military for 22 years and I've never seen a briefing quite like the one I witnessed last week. I've been doing some research into General Harrison's command history, and I'm finding some concerning patterns." Hayes had already identified the same issues that Lisa and Diana had discovered. More importantly, she had the authority and connections to investigate further without raising suspicions. "What I need from you," Hayes continued, "is complete honesty and detailed documentation. If we're going to address this situation properly, everything needs to be documented and verifiable." Lisa shared her recordings and written records with Hayes, who reviewed them with the practiced eye of someone who had dealt with discrimination cases before. "This is serious," Hayes said after examining the evidence. "But I need you to understand that pursuing formal charges against a general is going to be intense. The military justice system takes these cases very seriously, but the process can be brutal for everyone involved." Meanwhile, Diana was building connections with other victims. She had located 2 additional women who had served under Harrison in previous assignments. Both had stories similar to Lisa's and Jennifer's, though neither had documented their experiences as thoroughly. The investigation was expanding, but it was also becoming more dangerous. Harrison seemed to sense that something was happening. He began calling Lisa into his office for unnecessary meetings, asking probing questions about her activities and who she had been talking to. During one particularly tense encounter, Harrison leaned back in his chair and studied Lisa with cold eyes. "You know, Rodriguez, I've been hearing interesting rumors lately. Something about pilots who don't appreciate the chain of command and think they can go around proper channels when they don't like how things are handled." Lisa kept her expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir. I think you know exactly what I mean. Let me give you some advice. Pilots who make trouble for their commanding officers tend to find their careers taking unexpected turns. Not always pleasant ones. It was a clear threat, and Lisa knew Harrison was testing her resolve. But she also knew that Diana's recording device in her pocket was capturing every word. After that meeting, Diana made a decision that would change everything. She contacted the Inspector General's office and formally requested a full investigation into discrimination and abuse of power within Harrison's command. "We're past the point of quiet investigation," Diana told Lisa. "Harrison knows something is happening and he's getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also become dangerous." The formal complaint triggered a chain of events that couldn't be stopped. Within days, investigators from the Inspector General's office arrived at the base. Harrison was notified that he was under investigation, and word began to spread throughout the squadron. Lisa knew there was no going back now. She had committed to a fight that would determine not just her own future, but potentially change how the military handled discrimination cases. The quiet pilot who had always followed orders and kept her head down was about to become the center of a storm that would shake the entire command structure. As she prepared for the interviews and depositions that lay ahead, Lisa thought about her father's advice about getting back up after being knocked down. She was no longer just getting back up. She was fighting back with everything she had. The Inspector General's investigation had been running for 2 weeks when everything changed. Lisa was walking to the hangar for her morning pre-flight check when she noticed Sergeant Jake Martinez waiting by her aircraft. Jake was the squadron's communications specialist, a quiet man in his mid-30s who handled all the technical recording equipment and security systems on base. "Captain Rodriguez," Jake said, glancing around nervously, "I need to talk to you privately." Something in his tone made Lisa's pulse quicken. Jake had always been professional but distant, never one to seek out personal conversations. She followed him to a maintenance room where they couldn't be overheard. "I've been thinking about this for days," Jake began, his hands fidgeting with a small device. "What I'm about to show you could get me in serious trouble, but I can't keep quiet anymore." He held up what looked like a standard digital recorder. "I maintain all the security systems on this base. That includes the cameras in the briefing rooms, the general's office, and the hallways. Everything gets recorded automatically for security purposes." Lisa's heart began to race. She had her own recordings, but official security footage would be far more powerful evidence. "The day Harrison humiliated you in front of everyone," Jake continued, "I watched it happen on the security monitors. I've been doing this job for 8 years, and I've never seen a commanding officer treat anyone like that. It made me sick." He handed her the device. "But that's not the worst part. I started going through older footage looking for patterns. What I found is going to shock you." Jake had compiled months of security footage showing Harrison's behavior when he thought no one was watching. The recordings revealed a pattern of discrimination and harassment that went far beyond what anyone had suspected. "Look at this," Jake said, pulling up a video from 3 months earlier. The footage showed Harrison in his office with Captain Jennifer Park, the logistics officer who had shared her story with Lisa. In the recording, Harrison was berating Jennifer with language that was both unprofessional and clearly discriminatory. "She told me about meetings like this, but seeing it is different," Lisa said, watching Harrison's aggressive body language and Jennifer's obvious discomfort. "It gets worse," Jake replied, switching to another file. This recording showed Harrison meeting with a group of male officers, including some from Lisa's squadron. In the footage, Harrison was discussing female pilots in terms that were both degrading and inappropriate. "The military is no place for women who think they can play soldier." Harrison's voice came through clearly on the recording. "They're a distraction at best, a liability at worst. I've seen too many good men get soft because they're worried about protecting the females instead of focusing on the mission." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just discrimination. It was a systematic effort to undermine female service members. Jake showed her more footage. Harrison consistently gave female officers harder assignments than their male counterparts, then criticized them more harshly when they struggled. He made inappropriate comments about women's physical capabilities and emotional stability. Most damaging of all, he was caught on camera falsifying performance evaluations. "This recording is from last month," Jake said, showing footage of Harrison in his office late at night. In the video, Harrison was clearly altering written evaluations, changing positive comments to negative ones and lowering scores for female officers while inflating scores for his male favorites. "He's been sabotaging careers for years," Lisa whispered. the full scope of Harrison's actions becoming clear. "There's more," Jake said grimly. "I found communications between Harrison and other commanders. He's been actively working to prevent qualified women from getting promoted or receiving desirable assignments. It's not just affecting people in his squadron, it's affecting women throughout the entire base." Lisa thought about all the qualified female officers she knew who had been passed over for promotions or stuck in dead-end assignments. How many careers had Harrison destroyed with his systematic discrimination? Jake's revelations didn't stop there. He had uncovered evidence that Harrison had been pressuring other commanding officers to adopt similar practices. The discrimination wasn't just one man's prejudice, it was becoming an organized effort to push women out of combat roles. "Why are you showing me this?" Lisa asked, though she was grateful beyond words. Jake was quiet for a moment before answering. "My sister wanted to be a pilot. She's smarter than me, braver than me, and she would have been great at it. But she gave up because she said the military would never really accept her. I told her she was wrong, that things were changing. Now I realize she was right, and it's because of people like Harrison." Lisa felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her own career anymore. It was about every woman who had been pushed out, passed over, or given up on their dreams because of systematic discrimination. "What do you want me to do with this?" she asked. "Whatever you think is right," Jake replied. "But I want you to know that if you decide to use this evidence, I'll testify about what I found. I'll face whatever consequences come from that." Lisa contacted Diana Walsh immediately. When Diana saw the security footage, her reaction was immediate and intense. "This changes everything," Diana said after reviewing the evidence. "What we have here isn't just discrimination. It's organized conspiracy to violate federal laws and military regulations. Harrison isn't just a biased commander. He's running a systematic operation to exclude women from military aviation." The evidence was overwhelming, but Diana warned Lisa that it would also make the case much more dangerous. "When this comes out, it's going to expose a lot of people. Harrison won't be the only one facing consequences. Some very powerful people are going to be embarrassed, and they're going to fight back hard." Colonel Hayes was equally stunned when she reviewed Jake's findings. "In 22 years of military service, I have never seen anything this systematic and deliberate," she said. "This evidence suggests criminal violations of federal discrimination laws, not just military regulations." The investigation expanded rapidly. The Inspector General's office brought in additional investigators from Washington. They began interviewing officers from multiple bases where Harrison had served, uncovering a pattern of discrimination that stretched back over a decade. More victims came forward. Lieutenant Anna Thompson, who had served under Harrison 3 years earlier, revealed that she had been forced to transfer after refusing Harrison's suggestion that she would be more useful in a non-combat role. Captain Maria Santos described how Harrison had deliberately given her impossible assignments designed to make her fail, then used her struggles as evidence that women couldn't handle the pressure of military aviation. The most shocking revelation came from a retired colonel who had worked with Harrison earlier in his career. Colonel Robert Chen, Tommy's father, contacted the investigation team with information about Harrison's early years as a commander. "I served with Harrison in the 1990s, Colonel Chen explained during his interview. Even then, he had strong opinions about women in combat roles, but what I didn't realize at the time was how he was acting on those opinions. Looking back, I can see patterns that I should have caught." Chen provided documents showing that Harrison had been carefully maneuvering throughout his career to position himself in roles where he could influence policies affecting female service members. It wasn't just personal prejudice. It was a calculated campaign to maintain what he saw as the proper order of military hierarchy. As the evidence mounted, Harrison's behavior became increasingly erratic. He began calling unexpected meetings, questioning officers about their loyalty, and making thinly veiled threats about the consequences of cooperating with investigators. Lisa found herself under constant scrutiny. Harrison assigned her to the most mundane duties possible, clearly trying to isolate her from other pilots and limit her effectiveness as a witness. But his obvious retaliation only provided more evidence for the investigators. The case was building momentum that couldn't be stopped. What had started as one pilot's complaint about unfair treatment had revealed a systematic campaign of discrimination that touched dozens of careers and violated numerous federal laws. Lisa realized that she had uncovered something far bigger than she had ever imagined. The quiet fight for her own dignity had become a battle for the future of equality in military service. 6 months after that humiliating briefing, Lisa found herself standing outside the military courthouse at Fort Braxton, adjusting her dress uniform one final time. The court-martial proceedings were about to begin, and she knew that everything she had worked for, everything she had risked, would be decided in the coming days. The media attention had been intense. Word of the case had leaked to civilian newspapers, and suddenly Lisa's fight had become a national story about discrimination in the military. Reporters called her a hero. Others called her a troublemaker. Lisa tried to ignore both labels and focus on what really mattered, telling the truth. Diana Walsh walked up beside her carrying a briefcase full of evidence that had taken months to organize. "Are you ready for this?" Diana asked, her voice calm but serious. "As ready as I'll ever be," Lisa replied. Though her stomach was churning with nervous energy, the courtroom was packed. Lisa saw familiar faces from her squadron, including Tommy, Chen, and Captain Stevens, who had both volunteered to testify on her behalf. Colonel Hayes sat in the front row, her presence a reminder that this case had support from high-ranking officials who believed in doing the right thing. On the other side of the courtroom, General Harrison sat with his legal team. He looked older. Then Lisa remembered, his face drawn and his usually perfect uniform somehow less impressive. The weight of the investigation had clearly taken its toll on him. The military judge, Colonel Patricia Williams, called the court to order. Judge Williams had a reputation for being tough but fair, someone who wouldn't be influenced by rank or politics. Lisa hoped that reputation was accurate. Harrison's defense attorney spoke first, painting a picture of a decorated war hero who had devoted his life to military service. The lawyer argued that Harrison was being persecuted for having high standards and making tough decisions that some people didn't like. General Harrison served his country with distinction for over 25 years, the defense attorney said. He flew combat missions, led men and women in dangerous situations, and earned the respect of his peers through dedication and sacrifice. The allegations against him are nothing more than attempts to destroy a good man's reputation because he demanded excellence from everyone under his command. Lisa listened to the defense presentation, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. She had no doubt that Harrison had served bravely in combat. That made his treatment of female officers even more disappointing. A true leader should have been supporting all qualified pilots, not working to undermine them. When Diana stood to present the prosecution's case, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed immediately. She began by playing the recording of Harrison's public humiliation of Lisa, and even though Lisa had heard it dozens of times, it still made her cringe. "What you just heard," Diana told the court, "was not a performance evaluation or legitimate criticism. It was a calculated attack designed to embarrass and demoralize Captain Rodriguez in front of her peers. But this recording is just the beginning of the evidence we will present." Over the next 2 days, Diana methodically presented the case. Jake Martinez testified about the security footage he had discovered, describing how Harrison had altered performance evaluations and made discriminatory comments when he thought no one was watching. The actual video recordings were played in court, showing Harrison's true attitudes toward female service members. Captain Jennifer Park took the stand and described her experiences under Harrison's command. Her voice shook as she recounted the meetings where Harrison had questioned her fitness for military service and suggested she would be better suited for civilian work. "I loved being in the Air Force," Jennifer testified. "It was my dream job. But General Harrison made it clear that I wasn't welcome. Every day became a struggle just to survive, not to excel." Lieutenant Anna Thompson shared a similar story. She had been one of the top graduates from flight school, but Harrison had systematically undermined her confidence and sabotaged her assignments until she requested a transfer. "I blamed myself for years," Anna said during her testimony. "I thought, maybe I really wasn't good enough. It wasn't until this investigation started that I realized what had really happened to me. The most powerful testimony came from Colonel Robert Chen, who had worked with Harrison early in his career. Chen's testimony established that Harrison's discrimination wasn't recent behavior. It was a pattern that had been developing for decades. I should have seen it earlier, Chen admitted on the stand. There were signs, comments, and decisions that I should have questioned. My failure to act allowed this behavior to continue and hurt good people. When it was time for Lisa to testify, she felt surprisingly calm. She had been preparing for this moment for months, and she was ready to tell her story. Diana guided her through her military career, her achievements, and her experiences under Harrison's command. Lisa spoke clearly and factually, describing the different treatment she received compared to male pilots and the impact it had on her career and morale. "I never asked for special treatment," Lisa said. "I just wanted the same opportunities as everyone else. I wanted to be judged on my performance, not on assumptions about what women could or couldn't do." The cross-examination was intense. Harrison's defense attorney tried to paint Lisa as someone who couldn't handle criticism and was using discrimination claims to cover for her own shortcomings. But Lisa had prepared for these attacks, and her responses were calm and professional. "Captain Rodriguez," the defense attorney said, "isn't it true that you had difficulty accepting authority from day one in General Harrison's squadron?" "No, sir," Lisa replied. "I had difficulty accepting discriminatory treatment that had nothing to do with my performance or qualifications." The attorney pressed harder. "Weren't you simply looking for an excuse to blame others for your own failures?" Lisa looked directly at the attorney, then at Harrison. "Sir, my flight records speak for themselves. My performance evaluations from other commanders speak for themselves. The only failures in this case were failures of leadership." The trial continued for a week. Expert witnesses testified about military regulations regarding equal treatment and discrimination. Personnel officers explained how altered evaluations could destroy careers. Psychologists described the impact of systematic harassment on service members. Throughout it all, Harrison maintained his innocence. When he finally took the stand in his own defense, he portrayed himself as a demanding but fair commander who had always put mission success above personal preferences. "I held everyone to the same high standards," Harrison testified. "If some people couldn't meet those standards, that's not discrimination. That's military reality." But Diana's cross-examination was devastating. She played recording after recording of Harrison making discriminatory comments and showed document after document proving that he had altered evaluations and given unequal treatment to female officers. "General Harrison," Diana said during cross-examination, "on this recording you clearly state that women are a distraction at best, a liability at worst. How does that statement reflect equal standards for all service members?" Harrison's response was weak and unconvincing. "Those comments were taken out of context. They don't reflect my actual policies or decisions." Diana pressed further. "And this evaluation that you altered, changing Captain Park's rating from excellent to needs improvement, was that also taken out of context?" By the end of Harrison's testimony, it was clear that his defense had crumbled. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too obvious, and his explanations too inadequate. The closing arguments summarized everything that had been presented. Diana spoke passionately about the importance of equal treatment and the damage caused by systematic discrimination. Harrison's attorney made one final plea for sympathy, arguing that ending the career of a war veteran was too harsh a punishment. When the military judges retired to deliberate, Lisa felt emotionally drained but hopeful. She had told the truth, presented the evidence, and stood up for what was right. Whatever happened next, she knew she had done everything possible. The verdict came back after 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all major charges: discrimination, harassment, falsification of official records, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Harrison was stripped of his rank, dismissed from service with loss of benefits, and faced potential federal criminal charges. As the sentence was read, Lisa felt no sense of triumph, only relief that justice had been served and that other women wouldn't face what she had endured. 6 months later, Lisa was promoted to major and given command of her own squadron. Her first order of business was establishing new policies ensuring that all pilots would be treated fairly regardless of gender, race, or background. The changes went beyond just her squadron. The case had triggered military-wide reforms in how discrimination complaints were handled and how commanders were held accountable for creating inclusive environments. Lisa's courage had not only saved her own career, it had helped create a better military for everyone who came after her. Sometimes standing up for what's right requires risking everything you've worked for, but sometimes that risk is the only way to create real change.